Hello, and welcome to this training update for the discharge workflow in ORCHID. This update is for all providers currently providing inpatient care at any of the DHS facilities. We expect that you are already familiar with the components of discharge, including adding diagnoses, reconciling medications, adding patient education, follow-up instructions, and discharge orders. These requirements have not changed. So what's new? Before, the discharge components were scattered across the patient's chart or across a discharge summary mPage. It was also difficult to determine which components were completed. And discharge could still occur without review of these components, even though they are required. Now with the update, the components of discharge have been streamlined into a new inpatient discharge workflow mPage, and the system will check that each component has been completed in order to help ensure a safe and accurate discharge by the provider and nurse. To get started, navigate to the Provider View or Hospitalist View. The new Workflow mPage will be labeled as Inpatient Discharge in one of these tabs across the top. If you do not see this, click on the plus sign and select the purple Inpatient Discharge mPage to add it. With the Inpatient Discharge Workflow mPage, the components are now clearly laid out on the left side, and you can work from top to bottom. The required components are easily identified by a red asterisk or green check mark. The red asterisk indicates a component that is required but incomplete. The green check mark indicates a component that has been completed. You can update these components at any time from this page. Remember, all of this information is important because it will be compiled and printed for the patient to take. Let's quickly walk through these components. First is the consolidated problems. Remember, you can keep the problem list updated with daily rounding and make final changes before discharge. Providers are required to enter at least one problem or diagnosis being addressed this visit, and at least one chronic problem or diagnosis. Use the search field in the top right to search for new diagnoses, or mark previous problems using the buttons labeled This Visit or Chronic. If there are no chronic problems, click to document no chronic problems. After at least one addressed problem and one chronic problem are selected, the component will be marked as completed with a green check mark. The discharge diagnoses will be listed on the patient instructions. They will also be used to capture diagnoses for billing and reporting. Second is a medication reconciliation. The reconciliation status is listed at the top, and the list of outpatient medications that will be printed for the patient is shown below. The medication history is required prior to the admission or discharge reconciliation. If you need to complete the medication history, click on the button or label. To go to the discharge reconciliation, simply click Discharge in the reconciliation status. The discharge reconciliation is reviewed in the medication reconciliation section of the core training materials. After performing reconciliation, it is a good idea to review the list of discharge medications. Remember, medication reconciliation is critical for patient safety. That means for unlicensed providers like interns who propose medications, the medication reconciliation should be performed or reperformed after the prescriptions are co-signed. Also be sure the final discharge medication list is accurate, and ensure new prescriptions or refills have been appropriately routed to the pharmacy. Next is the immunizations component. No action is required by the provider in this section, but it provides a convenient way to review immunizations. Next is the patient education. Here you will find education materials that are suggested based upon your problem list. You should select at least one of these suggested handouts in order to meet meaningful use requirements. Then, you can also search for other materials using the search field. Once you click on a handout, its name will be listed under Added Education. Again, at least one educational handout is required, and at least one of these must be selected from the suggested list. To modify the handout, click on the pencil icon. You may also access the old interface for patient education by clicking the blue plus sign or clicking the Patient Education button from the Action toolbar. Next is the follow-up. To add a new instruction, you may select from your personal favorites, quick picks, or search a location or provider. Once selected, the instructions that will be printed for the patient will be listed here under Follow-up Instructions. To modify an instruction, select the instruction, click Modify, and update the information. You can also add free text in the comments section. Notice that you may also use auto text here. Click Save when you are done. You may also access the old interface for follow-up by clicking the blue plus sign. Conveniently, appointments that are scheduled in the system will be listed here under Scheduled Appointments. When you have completed and updated all the required components, you will only have green check marks, indicating you are ready to place a discharge order and documentation. You can also preview the patient discharge instructions that will be printed. To do so, click the exit door icon at the top right of the mPage. If you are familiar with FirstNet because you have worked in urgent care clinic or the emergency department, this is similar to the DPART process. This window shows the DHS Inpatient Summary, a document that pulls in data from the clinical encounter and that will be printed for the patient. It includes the discharge diagnoses based on the active problem list, discharge orders from the discharge power plan, the medication reconciliation synthesized from the reconciliation process, follow-up instructions and scheduled appointments, and the patient education materials. You will also notice on the left is a discharge checklist, similar to the discharge workflow mPage. You can update each item here by clicking on the pencil button. Again, the goal is to complete and update all required components. Incomplete components will be highlighted in yellow. Completed required components will turn to gray. The last item labeled Discharge Patient Nursing Only will be completed by the nurse at the time of discharge. Please note, if there are incomplete items when the nurse goes to discharge the patient, the nurse will be notified that the discharge information is incomplete. The nurse will then be responsible for contacting the provider to update the discharge information, or select a reason that this could not be completed. To avoid unnecessary delays upon discharge, the provider should update all information before initiating the discharge order. The discharge order and documentation have not changed with this update, and are always the last steps in discharging a patient. That concludes this update. Thank you for your attention, as together we continue to improve patient care at DHS.